weak innovation systems, limited technological adoption by businesses, ongoing infrastructure investment needs. There are plenty. But there is one common denominator across the region, and that's human capital. In fact, as I mentioned in the beginning of the slide, there are 5 policy clusters that we look at it. And the weakest performing cluster across the regions is the skills.
Interesting findings from the OECD. Now, one of the key issues, of course, for the past couple of decades has been how the European engagement, the accession process, the economic integration can help the convergence of the region with the rest of the European Union and Europe. The results are mixed at best. We do have some new tools. I'm very happy we have with us Finance Minister and the first Deputy Prime Minister, Siniša Mali, who is also in charge of growth plan here in Serbia. You just passed the budget for 2026. Tell us, how much difference can the growth plan make, both directly and indirectly, in helping Serbia accelerate the convergence with Europe?
Well, thank you very much, first and foremost, for the opportunity to talk at this panel. I think it's critical. First and foremost, if you look at the growth plan itself, it looks at the region as a whole. And I think it's critical for all of us to understand that in this particular case, size matters. So the bigger the region, the bigger the countries, the more economic power, the more opportunities you create. And I think, from the European perspective, looking at the Western Balkan as a whole, in terms of the growth plan and everything that the both growth and reform agenda assume, I think it's a great opportunity to accelerate our growth and to converge our economies even faster. Mentioning the presentation that we just saw, I just want to mention just one maybe interesting figure or fact. If you look at the GDP per capita in Serbia 2012, it was around 4,800 euros per capita. Okay, now it's 15,800 plus or minus, right? So it's more than doubled. And if you look at the growth rate, it's 160% over the period, which is the fourth largest or fastest growth in terms of the GDP per capita in Europe. Ireland, I think, was number one, Romania, and I think Bulgaria.
What's driving it?
It's actually a very good question. There are three things that drive that. One is the investments, because as you guys know, we invest this year, 7.4% of our GDP goes into capital expenditures. We're currently building 10 new highways in Serbia, plus investments in energy, high-speed railway network. All those public investments help accelerate the growth. They contribute to the employment as well. At the same time, we have the consumption, personal consumption, which is in real terms positive, hugely contributes to the growth, which is not what I'm saying. It's also, if you look at any credit rating report of Serbia, that's going to be one of the conclusions, as well as if you look at the IMF's report. And also, you have the third factor, which is actually the FDIs. More than 60% of all of the foreign direct investments flowing into the Western Balkan region come to Serbia. Last year, we had 5.2 billion euros, record-breaking figure for us. And then
what
you
are the
actually
sources
see
of that investment? Can we break it down?
Well, it's dominantly from the European Union into manufacturing. That's why you see the reindustrialization in Serbia in the last couple of years, and the effect of that are increase in exports and increase in imports as well. But the structure of imports changed. Now it's more equipment, technology, instead of just consumer goods as it used to be 10, 15 years ago. So from that perspective, just to come back, Vladimir, to your initial question, I think looking at the Western Balkan as a whole, I think it's very important. The growth plan contributes hugely. It actually, pushes us to be more efficient, to continue with the reforms, to continue with further integration. I personally think that all of the highways, roads, and high-speed railway networks that we create in the region will help future growth. But also, I think it's critical for all of us, coming back, for example, to the Open Balkan initiative to invest more into the labor market in terms of the education, as OECD's report just pointed out. I think it's critically important for the long-term sustainable growth of the whole region.
Great. Very nice framing. Let's move on to the European Commission. Jerzy Plecity. Is the growth plan a game changer when it comes to pushing for convergence with the Western Balkans in economic terms, but also in terms of the economic integration, not just the numbers, but also the actual market creation capacity? And perhaps a sub-question. We've already heard it from Robert at the beginning. We are undergoing a systemic change, and it's not just a political change, it's also a change in terms of how we understand market relations, economic relations. Do you see the growth plan as an opportunity to be part of the answer to these tectonic changes we are undergoing?
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. Very glad to be here, very honored, and thank you for giving a voice to the European Commission in this distinguished audience and panel. An easy reply to your question will be, it is all of what you have just said. But I will go a little bit deeper than that. I wanted to say that the introduction by the OECD and also what the Deputy Prime Minister was saying is a call for a very easy reply by the European Commission when it comes to the growth plan. Because if you look at the growth plan, it is designed to provide precisely the replies, the answers to the challenges that have been highlighted. When the Commission reflecting on what to do next with enlargement, and in particular Western Balkans, back in 2023, I think it came to two main conclusions, and these are interrelated. One is that accession path has not been fast enough, and second, that the convergence speed had not been fast enough. And those are actually interrelated. And that's why the growth plan aims to provide and reply to both of these aspects. It aims to be a real game changer, as you said, in terms of reaping much more the opportunities that the accession path presents in terms of fostering convergence and economic and social progress and growth in the Western Balkans, and at the same time to be a tool for actually accelerating the accession process, which in turn is also a way to foster that convergence. So these are, two communicating instruments. And now, I said that it is meant, it is designed to be this game changer. Mm-hmm. I have to say at this stage, maybe 2 years, 1 year and a half after it has been introduced, it has not yet been a game changer because the time for implementation has been simply too little and too short, and more obviously needs to be done to continue implementation of the various trends of the growth plan. You know that a lot of work has been put into the gradual integration pillar. Most of the Western Balkan partners are becoming or have become members of the Single European Payment Area, for example. Serbia is on its path.
As of May, we're going to be.
It is part of the geographical scope, but it will benefit fully from SEPA as of May next year.
As of May next year, we're going to be fully part of SEPA.
Just to give you an example. Reform and Growth Facility is starting to deliver on the ground in terms of reforms, and first payments have also been made. And a regional market is also achieving small but certain progress. I will leave this to my neighbor later on, but it's clearly also showing the potential that it can have for precisely fostering convergence and growth. For maybe a last point, if you allow me, the bottom line of all this is to ensure that the Western Balkan region is an attractive region for doing business, as it's an attractive region for foreign direct investments from the European Union in particular, to create the ground, the potential for further growth and further development. And again, a credible EU accession perspective and progress achieved on that perspective is a key to making sure that this attractiveness continues and is maintained and further strengthened. So this is why we insist so much in creating these ties, in improving business environment. I actually, if you allow me one last thing, when you presented the key areas that you covered in your competitiveness scoreboard, I was very happy to hear that, because these are precisely the 4 areas we are focusing on in the reform agenda. Sure. You know it very well, Deputy Prime Minister. With the business environment also encompassing, I'm sure, issues like rule of law, which we used to call fundamentals of the accession process. So we are there spot on, and I'm sure that delivery on all those reforms and those priorities will bring the benefits for the growth plan to be the game changer we want it to be.
Excellent. Thank you for that comprehensive overview, and also glad to see that the Commission and the OECD are sort of working in tandem, biking in the same direction, the same bike. We're already getting some Slido questions, so I would encourage you to join in. I have a very specific follow-up, and let me ask actually both of you the very same question. EU accession requires adhering to single market rules, which are crucial. And the question is also in the context of this discussion about growth plan and convergence, to what extent are the economies in the Western Balkans ready for stricter competition policy, such as the EU state aid rules? How is that working from the Commission standpoint? Let's start with the Commission. And what about Serbia?
You want to start with the Commission?
Please.
It would have been better to start with Serbia.
No, I want to start with the Commission.
Thank you very
now
much.
it's your turn.
Thank you very much. The competition is part of EU rules, as you know. All the accession partners are working on to progressively take on these EU rules and implement them in practice. They have achieved progress to a different degree depending on the countries. And what it takes is that in parallel, they have to be preparing for an environment in which these rules will be fully enforced. And all the businesses, the consumers, the economic stakeholders will be prepared for that. And I think this is the more difficult bit, actually. Preparing the institutions, adopting the laws is something which can be done and which has been done in the past. But moving progressively towards an economic model which is based on strong competition and strictly limited and regulated state aid is the main challenge.
There are a couple of things, if I may just
Please.
Add to that. First and foremost, as far as competitiveness in Serbia is concerned, we are a small country. So we are opening our economy, and we have been opening our economy for years now. I think the proof of that is simply that we have so many free trade agreements. Just to remind you, not only with the neighboring countries through the CEFTA agreement, but also with the Eurasian Union, with Turkey, with the Emirates, with Egypt, with China, for that matter. So what we've decided, apart from us heavily investing in the infrastructure, thus increasing the quality of infrastructure, heavily investing in the living standards of people, increasing salaries, pensions, minimum wage as well, we have actually decided to open our economy because the best way to increase competitiveness is actually to allow other companies to enter, thus bringing new technologies, new management, new systems, IT, etc., etc. Now, having said all of that, Serbia, as you know, has been on the EU path for more than 2 decades now. So pretty much all of the laws and bylaws that we have been adopted are aligned, plus or minus, of 100% with the European Union. What we have very aggressively is that by the end of next year, 2026, we will adopt and or amend each and every legislation to be in accordance with the EU. That's
including the free trade agreements.
The free trade agreements, as we said, the moment we become the full member of the EU, will cease to exist. So this is maybe my most important message to all of you today here. So basically, Serbia will be, until the end of next year, aligned formally with all of the laws and bylaws as far as the EU is concerned. Now, whether we're going to become the full member of the EU or not, it's a political decision, but as far as Serbia is concerned, it's a proof that we are willing to take whatever it needs to increase the competitiveness, the legislation, the business environment in our country by adopting the EU legislation. So state aid, for example, I mean, we're pretty much aligned, as you know, and our commission, State Aid Commission, has excellent relationship with the EU. We have to amend, those laws as well, which is part of the reform agenda, exactly, which we are doing, goes everything well. Just for this particular case, just for you to know, all of the changes to those laws have been sent to the European Commission. We are waiting for their comment, and then we're just going to adopt them. I think it's very important to show that in this particular case. So all in all, state aid, I mean, we have to follow that regulation. It has to, it will contribute to the overall competitiveness of the market. But having said all of that, by opening our economy as a small economy, we have no other choice but to be, how would I say, more competitive than some big players simply because of the size of the market and everything else. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much. Let me bring in, because we've raised the trade issue repeatedly, including the global trade relations, relation with the EU, but also the regional market and the relations with the partners in the region. Let me bring in Pranveria Castrati, who directs the Central European Free Trade Agreement Secretariat. Very happy to have you here. And just to pick up on the discussion we've had, what's the role of CEFTA? How effective is it? Are we any closer to a regional market as opposed to 10, 15 years ago? And what are the biggest stumbling blocks? Because indeed, when we talk about the enlargement to the region, you know, ideally it would be best if the region entered at some point, if not together, but there was a clarity when that happens and the region is part of the European future. So have we made progress and what are the stumbling blocks?
Thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation and very pleased to be here. Good morning to everyone. To answer to this, I think it's important to also bring a bit the trajectory of the historical development in CEFTA and how this is bringing the benefits. So when CEFTA started, the ambition was to eliminate tariffs and make sure that the goods are crossing at the crossing points without tariffs, and of course facilitating the procedure so that could yield the benefits. And year by year, this of course provided for substantial benefits, having today the intra-regional trade doubled, still having 70% of our trade with EU, which brings once again on the table the importance, the economic importance EU market has for CEFTA. But what CEFTA does? First, we try to reduce the fragmentation of the market. So we have 7 parties within CEFTA, and of course, with different size of economies, with different structure of the economies, and at the same time with different pace of development, which creates not only a fragmentation in terms of the markets, but it also in the path towards EU integration and alignment. And as the First Deputy Prime Minister mentioned, all the parties are racing in all this path to align with EU. But this also brings, to a certain extent, a fragmentation in terms of policy alignment due to the different pace of development and progress parties do. And what we try in CEFTA is to try to, let's say, close these 2 fragmentations and make sure that these fragmentations do not exist. And the convergence is the word that we hear the most. And the answer is not whether we are going towards this convergence with EU, but the way is how we do that. And we do that in 2 ways within CEFTA. First, by trying to align and create a compatible EU system within the framework of CEFTA, bringing the standards and EU policies more at the work we do, and also preparing and supporting CEFTA parties to reap the benefits of the gradual integration. And exactly this, here is where the common regional market with huge transformative potentials in terms of gradual integration and the growth plan come together, making the Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 very much complementing one the other, making the regional cooperation and the regional integration as a precondition to reap the benefits of EU gradual integration to certain new policies, even without being full members. And of course, the process of EU integration will proceed, but in the meantime, we can help to get these benefits ahead. And just to mention a few cases, Green Lane, which is something that I guess everyone has heard, that we started during COVID, trying to make sure that the crossing points, we had the free movement of essential goods, and now from an emergency tool is now a transformative tool that brings not only intra-CEFTA faster crossing of the goods, but also between the CEFTA and EU, with the green lanes being extended. Addition to this is recognition of the AO programs, which for businesses means having facilitated procedures at the crossing points without delays, going further to digitalizing trade and having a paperless trade with pre-arrival data coming digitally across all agencies at the crossing points, making sure that businesses do not wait there. And to conclude in this, recognition of the conformity assessment of test results, which for businesses again means avoiding any double analysis at the crossing points and faster trade among the parties. So I'd like to conclude by saying that while we see in CEFTA the transformative role bringing the framework at the regional level closer to the EU standards and a EU compatible system, and increase this intra-CEFTA cooperation based on new rules. And in parallel to this, we support the parties so that aligning and having the benchmark, the EU market, we help with 4 freedoms implementation, with good services, capital and people, while trying to also bring the skills mismatch in the market in our address by recognition of professional qualifications, which will increase the mobility of youngsters and opportunities to work across the region, but also providing for full alignment for this recognition with the EU. So the final answer to this, or my concluding line would be that while integrating together and through the CEFTA agreement, but also the Common Regional Market Action Plan, we are at the same time contributing to a faster EU integration process for all the parties.
Now, that's all very good and clear. Any two-finger remarks on the stumbling blocks? What are sort of the biggest challenges in terms of, making this work? Because clearly things have progressed, but things are not working as they should be.
Okay, I'll start with the easiest one, stumbling block, and then going to a more difficult one. So the first one is different stage of EU integration, which in a way makes the public administration across the CEFTA parties working in 2 parallel strands. And of course, this requires a very balanced planning and supporting increasing the capacities of the public administration to comply with the pressure coming in the integration process, be it this within the region and with the EU. And the second one, which is always stated and rated very high, is the political commitment of all CEFTA parties to translate the political commitments into very tangible results. And this is something that in a way is always considered as a precondition, but nowadays is the solution to many of the processes that we push forward in CEFTA.
Thank you very much. Let me bring in Valbona Zanelli. Valbona, you're a senior fellow at Friends of Europe, but also Atlantic Council, so have 2 hats on both sides of the Atlantic. Let me use that opportunity to kind of expand the discussion, but also zoom in on the conference which preceded BELTALKS. Last week in Brussels, Friends of Europe held the annual EU Western Balkans Summit. Any conclusions and messages from the summit last week in relation to the whole economic and convergence agenda? How much of the discussion focus on what to do with making sure that indeed the economy, the economic drive, is the key to integration? And are there any messages? And secondly, I know at the Atlantic Council you published your own scoreboard when it comes to convergence. So how does it align with the OECD scoreboard and the Commission's approach?
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Vladimir, for the panel. And thank you to Robert and his team for really keeping the Balkans, coming here in the Balkans, not just talking about the Balkans in Brussels or elsewhere. So that is really important. So a lot was discussed here in terms of the need for economic convergence, economic and social convergence, and what's the role of the growth plan. We at the Atlantic Council published a report where, talking about the importance of the growth plan and what could that spur for the region going ahead. But I'd like to make maybe 3 key points here also based on the takeaways of the last week's forum on the Western Balkans in Brussels. The first one, I think that it's important that we change the narrative, both coming, from the region, but also the, other players in the European Union, that it's not so much anymore just about the future of the Western Balkans, it's about the future of Europe. And Robert this morning was talking about the importance of economic security, of trade becoming part of national security. So I think that we have to change the narrative in saying that really the Western Balkans is critical for European competitiveness in the future. And so then what are the tools and what areas, I think from energy diversification to security issues to critical raw materials, there are some studies coming out there that the Western Balkan countries are rich in critical materials. So that is the very first thing. And the growth plan and the conversation then takes a new momentum considering the enlargement urgency. I think what we see in Europe is that really the geopolitical window of enlargement has opened because of Russia's aggression towards Ukraine. We have to recognize that that's what spurred the geopolitical urgency of enlargement. I think the political door is wide open because the narrative has changed in Brussels, has changed in European capitals when it comes to enlargement and how important that is for a geopolitical Europe. But the third point is that all the gates of integration into the European Union actually have to be opened by the candidate countries or the aspirant countries. So the reforms need to be done in these countries. So that's my first point, which is related to the narrative of the Western Balkans, on the Western Balkans. The second point is that I believe that the growth plan is an important element. It's not that much money coming with that, because if you consider it, it's around $500 million or euros a year to the region. But it's the instrument itself, because the instrument was really also modeled according to the European Recovery Resilience Facility. So that means that what worked in the European member states, what worked in the European Commission when it comes to delivering money to, depending on reforms to the member states, it was something that was proven that it worked out. And so that's why it's important for the Western Balkans, because it was explained all the necessary convergence that's needed. So it's a proven model that depends on reforms. And unfortunately, for a very long time, conditionality of the European Union towards enlarging countries has not worked very well. So I think this is a critical element to push those reforms. And then my third point is that at the end of the day, if you ask businesses, because it's about the economy. Everything is about the economy. If you talk to people in the region, what the European Union means to them, but also what are their main challenges, they're all related to economics. They're related to living standards, they're related to the education system, they're related to the brain drain, which is a new thing that's coming as a security challenge. So when you boil it down, I think still the reason that keeps the serious foreign investors away are issues of governance. So we should be open about that and work towards improving the business environment to have those serious foreign investors to make the difference. Because I believe that that's the main point. If you calculate, of course, the Deputy Prime Minister was talking about the foreign direct investment that have increased in Serbia, and Serbia is the biggest market in the Western Balkans. But if you consider that the European Union is the biggest, the economy that attracts the largest amount of foreign direct investment globally, with more than 35% of the total amount. And it's the main investor in the global economy. And when you look at the investment that goes into the region in terms of percentages, it's less than 1.1% of the total of the global foreign direct investment. So that's why we should use the opportunity, not only in the enlargement process, but of this geographical location that the region has, to make it really part of Europe.
A very quick follow-up question in terms of the mood and sense in Brussels last week at the summit. Is there a greater sense of a mutual trust and belief that enlargement indeed is going to happen? Because this in the past has been or was one of the big stumbling blocks in terms of doing reforms, committing on both sides, I should say. It was not clear whether the EU was really serious about enlargement in terms of the number of steps we did in the European Union in the past. And a lot of people in this region lost trust and hope in that. Do you have a sense that this is changing?
Mm-hmm. Well, I believe that we're living now in the longest non-enlargement period in the European Union since Croatia joined in 2013. So I believe that this is the most optimistic moment, considering this long enlargement fatigue that pushed reform fatigue also in many countries in the region. So I think we should use this moment, this opportunity. which is there. I don't know how long that's going to be there, but it is there. And then you mentioned that it's important also in terms of trust of people when it comes to enlargement. So sometimes we mistakenly look at data and polls, and and we see that percentages maybe in terms of EU integration could be lower in some countries. I believe in Serbia too, they are lower than in other members of in the Western Balkans. I don't think it's about the future of these countries in the European Union, because people, the appeal of of Western Europe is there. People are going into these countries. Maybe they have lost trust in the process itself, in terms of how long it will take for their countries to achieve all those results and reforms to be members. So I think it's important also how we read the polls in the candidate countries. Definitely better, more optimism in terms of trust, but we have to deliver on reforms.
Great. Let me move in very quickly to Umar Gökçe with a very quick question, but I want to bring in the young generation here. Because we saw the data on testing, PISA testing, we saw the data on also the demographic challenge. And I think one of the big questions for the region is and continues to be, is there real hope for the young generation here in terms of a better European and also better economic future? What are the key determinants for that in terms of the convergence scoreboard? And where do you see the biggest challenge?
Okay. It's certainly not easy to answer. I mean, is there hope? There's certainly great hope. I think there's no reason to lose hope. And in our policy work, we show that progress is there, and the bar has been raised over the last decade. It's not a doom and gloom story. There has been much done, and there can be more done. There can be more policies and more developments to come. But I mean, one thing I like to mention is, because we heard a lot about the reform agendas today, and the OECD is also working very closely with the European Commission, with the EU regarding on that aspect as well. And we want that it's not treated as a box-ticking exercise just to unlock more funds from the EU, because it's really important. The reforms that's included there are not just pushed down by the EU, but they will bring real change. I'll just give one example from Bosnia and Herzegovina, because we're working very closely there and also supporting the government in implementing it. One of the reform steps is like something very basic, and we're talking about regional integration, free trade. But for instance, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, we cannot even talk right now a full-fledged economic space. A business that receive a permit in the federation cannot do a certain works in Republika Srpska or vice versa. And one of the reform steps is very, very kind of targeted in the reform agenda, and how can we ensure harmonization and mainstreaming of this process so that businesses do not have to go through this multiple registration, licensing, approval processes. So, I mean, what I like to say is it's important, and there is actually, I think, it's ambitious, everything to be done by 2027, more or less. It's, I think, an ambitious target. But actually the reform steps are important, and I hope that there will be actually enough attention paid to those steps going forward as well. That doesn't quite answer your direct question, but I just wanted to...
But you're raising an important point about the fact that there has to be a greater regional sense in terms of the fact that, you know, there is a greater integration and greater opportunities within the region. And I think that is something which I'm also getting a message across the panel is a very hands-on issue for unlocking some of the economic potential in the region, in addition to bringing in the investment and engagement and the rules going with that. We are going to be coming to a close of this panel soon. If you have any last question, please raise Minister Siniša Mali, which I'm going to raise in this last round, but maybe let me ask the panelists if there are any reactions to what has been said, especially from Jiří Plecity and Siniša Mali. And let me also raise that question. It's very direct to you, Siniša. Is the WTO accession a priority for Serbia? Why or why not, the World Trade Organization? Let me start with you, please.
Sure. Well, before I answer that question, just a quick second to point out a couple of things which have been mentioned so far. I would just like to reiterate once more, we are firmly on the EU path, and Serbia is committed to, as fast as possible, EU integration. That's very important. Number two, don't get me wrong, but it's a two-way street. So it's not that everything depends on us. And we've been in the process for 25 years now. I think we've done a lot, and hopefully, as some of the panelists just mentioned, now is the time just to kind of finish the process. Hopefully, all bring it to its end one way or another, because I don't think we have a choice. Again, we are part of the European family, we are part of Europe, and we simply, once and for all, want to finish this formal process of becoming the full-fledged member of the EU. Number three, about the reforms, because if you look at the OECD's report and everything else, since 2015, we have the lasting agreement with the International Monetary Fund. And the core of that agreement are actually reforms in different areas: education, taxation, public management, SOEs, etc., etc. So irrespective of the EU path itself, because of the citizens of the Republic of Serbia, because of our policy, we are fully committed to continuing the reforms as is. That's the only way to grow forward. That's the only way to increase the quality of life and the standard of living. As far as the WTO is concerned, there are certain obstacles that we have. There are certain challenges. I think it would take too much time right now to discuss, because I see the timing, and I guess other panelists need to talk. But us being open, us becoming the member of the EU is one way or another. We also have to be part of the WTO. So it's not going to be an easy process for us because of the reasons I guess people know. But we'll finish that as well. I mean, so far we have proven to be very resilient and very committed when we determine what the goals are.
Great. All clear? Jiří Plecity?
3 points. First of all, I would like to really underline what was said about the need to seize the current momentum. Robert also mentioned it very well in his introductory speech about the geopolitical developments which underline the importance for Europe to rely on itself. And Europe meaning not only the EU, but Europe as a continent. And Western Balkans are part of it. So there is momentum, clearly I can confirm it. There is momentum for enlargement. There is political recognition of enlargement being an objective which we need to pursue. It requires, indeed, to keep that momentum on the EU side, but it also requires, as you underlined, to double down on the efforts in the enlargement countries when it comes to reforms, when it comes to the transformation that enlargement requires. Second point, I would really like to underline again what we see in the data is that there is a lot of potential out there for further economic and social convergence, for further economic and social development, which has not been sufficiently seized. I think the figure that you gave on the percentage of EU FDI going to the Western Balkans as part of EU FDI shows that much more money is out there to be invested in the region. If only there is a further push to ensure that the business environment, the conditions, the reform drive is there to give a perspective to the investors that they can rely on the stability and on this region belonging in a longer-term perspective to the safe haven of the EU framework. And it's really not only about the situation on the ground, it's also about the trust that this process is going in the right direction. And again, I'm underlining that this, of course, there is a role to play for both sides, the EU and the Western Balkan partners in this. And finally, I just very quickly, young people, I would really like to underline this. Enrico Letta, in his recent report, coined this term, right to stay. And I think this should also apply to this region. And all we said about the giving the perspective, I think also applies to giving a perspective to young talents, that if they develop their talent in the region rather than leaving, they have a good future for themselves, and it will, of course, in turn benefit the economic growth and potential for the region. But again, this also requires good policies, good reforms, and investments that go with them.
Thank you for bringing the young people. Any last remarks by Ranvira?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to reflect very shortly on 2 or 3 points.
Let's stick to 2, if I may.
Yeah, okay. So we all said that common regional market growth plan, the transformative potentials he has in terms of aligning the policies, aligning the standards with EU. But the question here is also ensuring the sustainable growth. And being part of the EU doesn't mean necessarily only you are geographically part of it, but also the supply chains and the productivity in those supply chains needs to be reached. And this brings me to the second point, remark I want to make, is how much we are innovating. How much are the economies of this region innovating? And just a figure, so the R&D on average of the Western Balkans is at the level of 0.45% as share of GDP, while the average in EU is 2 to 3%, which already tells that we are far beyond that. And last, are we digitalizing, or is digital pushing us towards something new? I think that this is something that all the governments should have in mind, in particular with AI coming more prominently in our way.
That's an excellent point. We will have a discussion on digital in the afternoon. Already looking forward to it. Thank you for setting us up. Last but not least, Valbona.
Yeah, just one quick point. It's not business as usual anymore. And we have to have that understanding. And from that perspective, also in what's happening around the world, the Western Balkans is not anymore the backyard of the European Union, but it's the front yard. And let's try and use that opportunity also and be part of European solutions, be that security perspective, but also economic perspective. So kind of understand and create the narrative also from that point of view on nearshoring and Western Balkans shoring and how the region can become a vital part of European supply chains in the future.
Great point. Great setting for the next panel. Please do come back in about 10 minutes to discuss on the Berlin process, so a wider framework. And before we move to a quick coffee break, please do help me in thanking the panelists. I think this has been a good staging for the rest of the conference.